When a young woman is possessed by a Jinn, she has no idea that this supernatural foe has the ability to flow. And then we take a look at the story of a young boy who wakes up in the middle of the night to find his sister standing at the other end of the room. While she is fond of playing pranks, he slowly begins to realize that this is no joke, and that is not his sister. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you guys have some awesome plans for the weekend. We have a ton of stuff to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Greg Gorley. Woohoo, yeah, we's all running on in, doing a little dance. Doing a little dance, monkey dance. Dance, monkey dance. He's swaying from side to side. Greg, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. He's our newest Patreon supporter. If you guys can't financially support the show through Patreon donations or the merch store, I really understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Also, let's take a look at this awesome fan art Friday submission we received from longtime listener and officially one of our foreign correspondents, Fabio Nerbon. He's sent a bunch of stories in over the years. He sent me this drawing recently. I mean, look at that. That's fantastic. That is so awesome. And of course, when Fabio sent it, he goes, I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's any good. That's awesome. That's absolutely fantastic. The level of talent that you guys have never fails to surprise me. So Fabio, thank you. Really enjoy it. We got this dead rabbit ghoul rising from the well. Little radio there for him to listen to. Really, really awesome work. Greg, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to go ahead and toss you a saddle. Why don't you throw it on back of the cuniculus camel? Cuniculus, it doesn't really work if I have to explain it each time. You're like, what is that? Cuniculus means rabbit, or I think it might just mean burrowing mammal. But anyways, everyone climb on board the cuniculus camel as Greg gallops us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command all the way out to Morocco. Clump, clump, clump. Like, did you sneeze? Did you forget to edit out a sneeze? No. It's the camel spitting. We've only used it once before. This is probably the last time we're going to use it. Greg is riding the cuniculus camel all the way out to Morocco. And we're about to meet a family that's currently on a bit of a road trip. Now, first off, this story was sent to us by Mohammed Belladel, a member of the Fluffle. Sent the story over. He said this story happened when he was just a toddler, but while he wasn't a direct participant in any part of this story, he knows this story pretty well. It's definitely something you would talk about for years and years and years. We're taking a look at this family, Muhammad's family, that was on a road trip one day. We're about to meet Muhammad's father, who we will call Jake. We don't have the real names. Muhammad's father, we'll call him Jake. Muhammad's aunt, who we will call Lucy. Muhammad's grandpa, who we will call Mike. You're grabbing a pad and paper. You're like, oh, what? Write these names. What's grandpa's name again? And Lucy's husband, Phil. These are all the people in this car driving down the road. But really, the one person you really gotta be concerned about is Lucy. Lucy, for better or for worse, in her case worse, is the star of this tale. Jake is driving this car through Morocco, little road trip, impromptu road trip. And listen, we've all been on road trips before. Sometimes it's about the scenery. Sometimes it's about the destination. And in this family's case, the destination is all they're worried about. There could be all sorts of fantastical things happening outside of this car. They don't care. They're trying to get to their destination as quickly as possible. Jake has the pedal to the metal. This car is flying down the freeway at a breezy 3 miles an hour. Grandpa's like, Jake, can you make this car go any faster, please? Jake's like, I'm trying. Look. My foot is all the way down. The gas pedal is to the floor. They're going a brisk 3, maybe 5 miles an hour. Cruising down the road. Cars are zipping past them. No matter how hard Jake is pushing this car, it will not go any faster. And it's not because it's a crummy car. It's because Lucy doesn't want to go where they're going. Or a better way to put that, Lucy may want to go there, but the Jinn that has currently possessed her body does not want to go to this destination. What happened was, previous to this car ride, the lead up to all this, is that Lucy did get possessed by a Jinn. And the reason why is this Jinn fell in love with her. This Jinn saw this beautiful young woman and decided, that is who I want to be my wife. So he possessed her. It's a little weird, right? Like, I get the whole seeing someone beautiful and wanting to marry them thing. But if you possess her, kind of you're just marrying yourself. Now you're just in a woman's body. Which, actually, now that I think about it, might actually work out. You're like, oh, I don't have to deal with someone else and all their drama. I can just be a beautiful woman and marry myself. I'm still a straight dude, but now I'm wearing this beautiful woman's body. And now I'm just going to go get married. You can do that, right? You can go marry yourself. I'm sure some minister will allow that. And then you pronounce yourself man and wife. You're the same. It's perfect. It's perfect. You're the beautiful woman. And you're like, Jason, this show always teeters on the edge of somebody's fetish. Possibly yours. No, it's not me who's bringing this up. The Jinn did it. The Jinn is doing it. The Jinn wants her as his wife. He's in love with her, so he possesses her. So now, like, no other man can have her. And the Jinn also says no other Jinns can have her. You don't understand how beautiful this woman is. Other Jinns also want to possess her. You guys are lucky that I possessed her first. And the family's like, no, we probably don't want anyone to possess her. It's not a matter of who's on first. It's not a matter of who's first. We don't want anyone to possess Lucy. The Jinn refuses to leave. So what happens is the grandfather, who's well versed in the Quran, says, you know what we need to do is there is a place called Mulay Yacob, which has cleansing waters. It has these hot springs, these natural hot springs. It has these cleansing waters that people for hundreds of years have gone to purify themselves. If we can get Lucy to the hot springs at Mulay Yacob, the Jinn will have to leave. Everything we've tried to get rid of this Jinn so far, I mean, he's pretty adamant. He wants her. Let's get her to Mulay Yacob. So Jake grabs the keys to the car. They get Lucy into the car, and they're driving down the road. And what happens is the Jinn is sitting in the back seat going, I don't want to go. I don't want to take a bath. I don't want to get cleansed out of this beautiful woman's body. No. So as the car is driving down the road, the Jinn's like, oh, you know what? I forgot I totally have magical powers. I could have flown away at any point or just teleported myself into the middle of a mountain. I would have had her forever. Took him a while to remember, oh yeah, I forgot, I'm magical. So he slows the car down. No matter how much Jake is trying to push this car to fly down the highway, the Jinn's like, nah, man, we're going slow. We're taking this slow. Maybe they'll get bored. Maybe they'll get bored halfway through. Maybe they'll just say, whatever, we don't like Lucy that much anyway, she can be possessed by a Jinn. The family, they love Lucy. Plus, remember, her husband's in the car as well. The husband has a vested interest in getting her unpossessed. They all do. You know, they all love her. She's a family member. Husband doesn't want to be banging this Jinn. So they decide to get her down there. He's slowing down the car. The trip takes... This was supposed to be a quick jaunt down there throw her in the water, give her a quick cleanse, and then it was over with. But they're crawling along in this car. It adds an extra hour to the journey. Finally, though, they do pull up to the parking lot of this hot springs. It's like a spa you can go to. It's not just a religious site. It's a place you can go for those things, definitely, but you can also just kind of relax. I think, right? I mean, the picture made it look like a resort. I wouldn't plan a trip there and be like, you show up in shorts, you're like, I'm going for a swim. They're like, this is a sacred spot, bro. You're all like, cannonball. Everyone's getting extra purified. They're all, yay. We should have been doing cannonballs this whole time. I hope this isn't some sacred holy site that I'm cracking these jokes about. Again, could have done more research. But it took such a long car ride to get here, I didn't have time. So anyways, we're at Muley Jakob Hot Springs. They pull up to the parking lot. So they're like, man, it took forever. But now it's time. Lucy, get out of the car. And Lucy is fully possessed. She's like, no, I'm not getting out of the car. I know what you guys are going to do. You guys are going to make me go to the hot springs. You're going to purify. I don't want to do it. They go, Lucy, you got to get out of the car. So before they can even start, like, man, they realize now they're going to have to wrestle her out of the car. Before they even get to do that, all of a sudden the car starts rocking back and forth. Rocking, And Jake, who told the story to his son Mohammed, said he felt like there was a bunch of dudes, a bunch of four like big old guys just rocking the car back and forth, like you see after like a soccer game or a football game, NFL Super Bowl thingy, where there's like a riot. Imagine that, but the whole riot is just your car. The whole riot is descended on just one automobile. The car is rocking back and forth. They're like, they're all have big gulps going everywhere. But that stops. Eventually, they are able to get out of the car. This Jinn seems like he probably has to balance his power between maintaining control of Lucy, continuing to possess her, as well as throwing up all of these roadblocks in front of them. Because you figure if he has the power to rock a car, they would not be able to get her out of the car at all. But it seems like he has to keep kind of changing things up. He definitely does have limitations, this Jinn, which I would argue that most demons, most spiritual enemies of man do have immense power, but it's not unlimited. It's not all-encompassing. So, Grandpa and Jake and the husband Mike, they get out of the car. So, Jake and the husband, Phil, and Grandpa, they get out of the car, and they're like, okay, we're going to have to carry her out. She's not getting out on her own. And every time they open one of the car doors, it slams shut. And they go, okay, well, let's try that again. Maybe that wasn't the Jinn. Maybe it was just the after effect of having a bunch of people rock your car back and forth. Let's try that again. They open the car door, it slams shut. They're like, it's the Jinn. And no matter what car door they try to open to get back into the car, they keep slamming shut. So finally, they go, why don't we just all focus on one door and two guys hold it open while the third guy drags Lucy out of the car? Like, there has to be a way to end this. They finally are able to force one of the doors open, keep it open, while the other one grabs Lucy, pulls her out of the car. She's fighting the entire way, or the Jinn is, to be more specific. And while all this is going on, there's a local imam walking by. He goes, oh, that's probably something I should go. He just hears the sound of car doors slamming shut. He sees people being like, how are we going to get her out of this car? And the mom goes, I probably should help them out. There's probably something going on over there that's a little outside of their purview. He walks over. He's like, hey, guys, what's up? And they're like, hey, thank you. Are you don't happen to have a bad back, right? You have pretty physically strong. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty healthy. They go, yeah, this young woman, she got possessed by a Jinn. We're trying to get her to the hot springs. And the imam's like, oh, yeah, no, I'll totally help with that. I'll help you out. So they do. They're able to get this young woman all the way to the hot springs. It's parked super far away. Jake's like, I don't want to park too close. It costs too much. We'll park over here, a couple blocks away. Eventually, they are able to get her to the hot springs. And they're like, okay, so Lucy, listen, the gig is up. Jinn, listen, the gig's up. Like, here's the healing water. Just put your hands in it. And the Jinn's like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. They go, oh, okay, Lucy, we know you're inside there. We know you're still inside there. You put your hands in the water. And Jinn's like, no. Jinn's like, yeah, she is still inside of her, but no. Neither of us are putting our hands in the water. We're not getting purified. And they go, well, what if we just like sprinkled it on you? He's like, no, I don't want to do that. I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do. I don't want anything to do with it. So the game's over, right? You got me all the way here, but there's no way you're going to get me in the water. Like, we can do this all day long. And the grandpa's like, not really. We have other stuff to do, and we do want to have our family member back sooner rather than later. So he does this thing. The Grandpa Mike puts his thumbnail underneath the thumbnail of Lucy. And this is some sort of, like, power move. It's going to allow this final battle to take place. Grandpa Mike puts his thumbnail underneath the thumbnail of Lucy and begins reciting chapters of the Quran, specifically ones that are regarding the Jinn. And what it's called is actually a passage called The Mankind. And it talks about how Allah has power over everything. He has power over everything, both of man and of Jinn. So it's basically reaffirming that, bro, you may be inside Lucy, but Allah has power over me, but he also has power over you. You are not stronger than Allah. And he's repeating this over and over again. He's repeating this passage over and over again, talking about how God is stronger than the Jinn. When all of a sudden, Lucy, though, all of a sudden begins to speak in this very low, Barry White type of voice. Hey, you think you're going to beat me? Well, I got other news for you. And then Lucy began, the Jinn, speaking through Lucy's voice, but now Lucy is speaking like Barry White, who I keep getting mixed up with Barry Manilow. Barry White is the baritone guy, right? Or the bass guy. Super low voice. She starts speaking in this super low voice and begins reciting different verses of the Quran. And the way that Jake described this story is because he's still sitting there, right? He's like, oh, great, this will take forever, man. I thought once we got him to the river, I thought once we got him to the hot springs, we could splash a little water on it and be done. Now, all of a sudden, he said it sounded like battle rappers. Grandpa Mike would say a verse or two from the Quran, and then the Jinn would respond with one or two verses himself. And it was like this flow. It was almost like a rap battle that these two people, a man and a Jinn, were having. They're trying to one-up each other. The Jinn is trying to say these verses that, which I'd be interested in knowing what the Jinn's verses were. Muhammad didn't tell me that, but I'm curious. I mean, it's possible his dad didn't remember. His dad is probably, probably shocked that his sister is speaking in this crazy voice. It's like, oh no. He's not writing down the verses. He's like, oh, my son might want to know about this in case he ever tells a paranormal podcast in 30 years. The Jinn and Grandpa Mike are going back and forth. They're saying these verses, they're kind of going back and forth. But eventually, though, Grandpa Mike and the forces of good win this war when he is able to, using verses from the Quran, convince the Jinn that it needs to leave Lucy's body. Because really, at the end of the day, Grandpa Mike is right. God is more powerful than any of these paranormal entities that exist, even though they plague mankind and can ruin lives and end lives. They are secondary to the Creator. Jinn's like, okay, fine, I'll leave her body. But guys, I'm telling you something. As he's like walking into the water, he has to get his final word in. He's like, fine, they're getting ready to put his hands in the water. Probably at this point, just throw her in, dunk her, keep her down there for a while just to make sure. And he goes, guys, listen, I'm telling you something, I will leave her body. But there are going to be other Jinn that want her. Because she is so beautiful. She's so beautiful. Other Jinns are going to want her. You may have beaten me off, but you don't know what else is out there. Another Jinn's going to get her. And actually, the Jinn says, I forgot, again, I have magical powers. From this moment on, the Jinn proclaims, I curse Lucy. I curse her. If I can't have her, nobody can. As they're getting ready to purify him with this holy water, he goes, no, I curse her now and forever. She will never, ever get married. And everyone's standing around there like her husband's right there. She's been married. Not a very well-researched curse, Mr. Jinn. And the Jinn is purified out of Lucy's body. What's interesting, there's a lot of stuff that's interesting about this story. We have the battle of a young woman's mind, body, and soul as the Jinn's trying to possess her forever. There's a couple really interesting things to pick out of this story. Mohammed, thank you for sending it over. Mohammed is listening to Dead Rabbit Radio in chronological order, which a lot of you guys have done, starting at episode 1. He just found the podcast, I think, a couple months ago. He's started listening to episode 1. He says he can listen to like 6 episodes a day, like at work, which is awesome. Because I know when I used to have a job where I could listen to podcasts, that's what I would do. I would just listen to podcasts for 6 to 8 hours, and I had a ball. I loved it. So I'm glad I'm that part of your life, the way that those podcasts were for me. It was really the ultimate compliment. But he goes, I'm listening to the episodes in chronological order. He sent me this story over, and then a couple weeks later, he goes, oh, dude, I just got to episode 975, and I want to tell you, I'd never heard episode 975 yet. I did not make this story up. I did not make this story up at all. The story that I told you about my family, I've heard that story for years. I don't want you to think that I made it up. And I was thinking, what? I didn't think he made it up, and he didn't make it up. But what he's in reference to is that in episode 975, and this is what's so interesting, I go, it's actually really cool when I hear different stories set years apart that have similar events taking place, because if anything, that doesn't make me think the stories are made up. It makes me think that the stories are more true, because you have different people who have never contacted each other telling stories that are quite similar. Episode 975, we had a story about a woman who was possessed by a Jinn. And the Jinn says, I want to marry her. I don't want anyone else to have her. The Jinn spoke in a very deep voice, speaking through this woman. And the way that they saved her from the Jinn, the way they ended the possession, was she had to drink something called Zamzam water, which is a holy water, like a blessed water from a particular well or spring. And I said, I didn't think that you had copied it. I honestly had forgotten about that episode until you brought it up. But to me, that makes it more likely that the two stories are true. The same reason why we think gray aliens are a thing is because so many people have encountered them. If only there had been one story about a gray alien, and every other alien story was about a reptilian, you'd go, well, maybe that gray one's made up. More and more people you have tell a similar story that hasn't been exposed to that story, the more likely that there's something going on. I found that very fascinating, that we have these similarities. There is something, we talk about the differences between demons and jinns. Sometimes they're confused. Sometimes they're compared a lot. They're considered enemies of man. We've done a lot of episodes on Jinn. And Jinn do seem to be separate from a traditional demon. But there is some crossover. I'll put those episodes in the show notes, because if you're really interested in Jinn, we've gone really deep into the lore, almost too deep to even do a review on. Muhammad, thank you so much for sending the story over. As far as we can tell, like, again, Muhammad wrote this to me. I don't know how old he is, 20s or 30s or something like that. It's been, at least a decade. He's old enough to use a computer. He's old enough to have a job to listen to podcasts while he's working, so he's not a kid. Lucy's never been repossessed. Lucy's never had another Jinn come after her. So, and she's married. So, I mean, again, I think that's funny too when you have this diabolical being beyond space and time being like, every Jinn will try to possess her and she'll never find a man. And he was wrong on both counts, which is kind of reassuring in a way because it means that these guys, these arch enemies of mankind and all the good that exists in the universe, they can whiff. They can whiff. They can take a swing and whiff every now and then and be real off. And that's just reassuring knowing that they can make mistakes. They can also boast and then just nothing come of it. So as far as we know, as far as Muhammad knows, a happy ending. And hopefully that will continue to be the case for Lucy and her husband and all of Muhammad's family. Greg, I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous Carpenter copter. Everyone climb on board as Greg fires this bad boy up. We're leaving behind Morocco. Why don't you fly us all the way out to British Columbia? The other day, I was on that subreddit, which I said I wasn't going to go to anymore. I said it's possibly cursed. It might be a cursed subreddit. We talked about it a long time ago on the podcast. I'll put the episode in the show notes. I'm always like, I don't know why I do this, but before I go to bed, I find I don't even want to say like worst or disturbing. It's not necessarily that, although this one does qualify for both of those. I'll find myself going to the drug subreddits like meth or heroin or opiates and just reading stories about how people really screwed their lives up. They're like, oh man, I can't believe. Like, I thought it was bad enough that I was already doing a ton of meth, but now I've done this. And like, all the lights are off in my bedroom and I'm scrolling on my phone. And I read a story recently about someone who, it wasn't meth, it was heroin they were addicted to, but they heard from a meth head that meth, if you do enough meth, if you can't trust a meth head, who can you trust, right? So meth head said if you do enough meth, when you pee, your urine's full of meth. That's how they drug test you for meth. So theoretically, you could then drink your pee if you don't have enough meth around. Well, this guy was an opioid addict. He was addicted to fentanyl or something like that, heroin, whatever the kids are taking these days. And so he goes, well, maybe the same thing works for heroin. Well, maybe the same thing works for opiates. I know they drug test your urine for opiates, and he didn't have any opioids on him. It's not like he's like, well, I have all of this. I have these huge bundles of heroin sitting next to me, but I like to live by my own rules. He was all out of drugs, so he ended up peeing and drinking it, hoping it would get him high. It didn't. By the way, it didn't work. It was disgusting. It was disgusting urine. I read these things late at night. I go to the problem gambling subreddit, and like people are blowing 20, 30 grand in a weekend. Horrifying stuff before you go to bed. Horrifying stuff. These are real humans with real tragedies, right? I'm going to these subreddits all the time. Alcoholism subreddits and problem gambling subreddits. One of the subreddits I go to is one that's called Sexual Offender Support. And it is people who have been accused or convicted of sex crimes and them basically complaining about it. It's a lot of complainers, if you can believe that. They take very little responsibility for their own actions. Mostly it's, I just got raided by the feds. What can I expect? A lot of those posts. And then people who've gotten out of prison and dealing with being on the sexual offender registry. So a lot of people talking about those two things. I came across this post recently where this guy says, hey, because they're constantly looking for work, right? That's one of the things when you get convicted of a sex crime, it's really hard to get a job, which is not, which no stretch of the imagination why that would be hard. So they're always constantly complaining about not being able to get any work because they're on the registry and it's really easy to check all this stuff. There is no registry for burglars. There is no registry for people who commit fraud. I mean, there is, it's called probation, but you know what I mean? Once that's all done, you may not ever know that they even committed a lot of these crimes. But the reason why there's a registry for those crimes and not for being a bank robber is because one set of crimes is super gross, right? It's kind of disgusting. It's really gross. You got to be on this registry. The other day I was on the sexual offender subreddit. I don't even know why I keep going there because it's so insane. And I swear that it is cursed. There's just some sort of evil lurking around that subreddit. Obvious evil, human evil, but then there feels like there's something else there. Something darker. Anyways, this guy said, hey, I was wondering, because they're always trying to find work, right? So the second they found out, one of these big companies, like, they don't care if they have child molesters working there. They don't care if you're on the registry. Just a big box store. It was a national chain. They don't care if a child molesters work there. Someone goes, hey, I was wondering if I could get my commercial pilot's license. I'm on the registry. I'm on the sexual offender registry. And they never really say what they're on there for. They don't tell us. Because they don't take responsibility for what they've done. But this guy was wondering, do you think I could fly planes? If I went to pilot school, got a pilot's license, do you think an airline company would hire me to be a commercial pilot? And that raised two interesting questions. One, people on the board said, actually, I don't know. They said, usually like a lot of these guys end up working construction or doing work from home, like telemarketing, things like that. Not many have applied themselves to get a commercial pilot's license. That's what a lot of people were saying on the subreddit. My question, and this is leading somewhere. This isn't just me talking about the trauma I ingest before I go to bed. I thought, would you mind being a passenger in a jumbo jet if the pilot was a child molester? Like, would that change your outlook on the plane ride? You're like, I never thought anyone would ever ask that question, Jason. I'm going to have to think about it for a second. I would not want to be on a plane that's piloted by a child molester. And if you're like, Jason, we actually didn't need to think on that. That's the easiest answer in the world. I would say if someone has such poor self-control skills, listen, at the very least, poor self-control skills or poor ability to make choices, at the very least, and really you have to chalk in evil. An evil person who's prone to making decisions that will impact the rest of their life, but they don't care. They only care about right now. That's the last person I would want to be a pilot of a plane. An evil person who cannot make good judgment calls. Here's the thing, and if they're an evil person and they can make good judgment calls, I don't want them to do it either. They're like, no, I've planned out my entire revenge against society. It's mapped out. I make great judgment calls. No, I don't want any evil people flying my plane, but would you? And the guy's like, no. He announces it. He's like, well, according to the registry, I have to announce this before each flight. I am a child molester, and I want to fly you to your final destination. People are like jumping out the windows. They're like, no, this is terrifying. He goes, I have to announce to everyone that I am a child molester, but I don't do that anymore. Now I'm a pilot. Now I'm in charge of 300 people's safety for the next 3 to 4 hours. Would you want... Because here's the thing, nobody knows if the hiring board at an airline would say, yeah, you know what, we're cool with this. It happened a long time ago. Don't worry about it, bud. Here's your keys. Here's your keys to the airplane. You start in 2 hours. Here's a hat. Would you want a child molester to fly your plane? And you really don't have a choice, right? When you go to get on a plane, you don't know the criminal background of the pilots. You assume it's zero. Or it may be the worst, when they were younger, they got in a bar fight or something like that. Maybe they got caught stealing some money from grandma. But a registered sex offender flying your plane, would you be good with that? And that actually does segue into our next story. Now, I will say, in the intro, I said I was going to tell a story about a brother encountering his sister late at night. We're not going to do that one. We're going to save that for another one. I have this story to talk about. I thought this was pretty intriguing and a good way to wrap up the week. We're headed all the way out to British Columbia. We're about to meet a young man. We don't have any of their real names. We're going to call him Sam. And he's living in the bottom suite of a house with his sister, who we will call Melody. So Sam and Melody are renting out the bottom half of this house. The top half of the house is where the landlord lives. And Melody and Sam's parents know the landlord, so that's good. You already know if this person's like a big old weirdo. You already know if this person's obsessive compulsive because it's been vetted by the parents. The place is also fully furnished, which is great. When young people are moving in, they don't have to worry about getting a bed, getting a couch, getting all that stuff. In fact, Sam's room not only is fully furnished, there's also a bookcase full of books. Sam's like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. When they said fully furnished, I didn't know it was coming with homework. I didn't know I had to read these books and do book reports on them. He figured that this was just part of the decor. A bookshelf in his bedroom full of these books. He's like, okay, whatever, you know. Well, after moving in, one night Sam wakes up in the middle of the night and he can't move. He is experiencing, for the first time, sleep paralysis. He doesn't know what's going on at that time. There's just that panic that sets in when he can't move. Sam's struggling against this bizarre, natural thing that, you know, sleep paralysis can happen to anybody. But it's still terrifying. And not only that, Sam begins to feel like someone is sitting on his chest, while at the same time pinning down his arms and his legs. He's eventually able to break free. He's able to reactivate his muscles and break free of this absolutely bizarre phenomenon. And despite being panicked that it even happened in the first place, Sam is able to go back to sleep. The next night, Sam wakes up in the middle of the night. Same thing. The crushing weight of something on his chest. He's unable to move his hands and his legs. He's struggling, but this time he's angry. Less fear and more rage at what's going on. And he screams. He screams out for this thing to leave him alone. And immediately he feels the sensation lift off of his body. Immediately he can begin to move again. Which is interesting. Sleep paralysis is where your body is paralyzed while you're dreaming, and if you wake up at a odd time, your body's still paralyzed. It's to keep you from jumping up and running around and reenacting your dreams or nightmares. Your body has to paralyze itself. So it is just a natural thing that can happen with the human body. But when Sam yells out for this thing to F off, which is what he said, and for it to go away, it makes it seem like it's less of a natural phenomenon and more of a supernatural phenomenon. A few weeks later, it's 10 p.m., Sam comes home, and he's walking around the house, and he walks into his bedroom, sits down on his bed, and starts taking his shoes off when his sister Melody walks to his bedroom door. And she goes, "Hey, Sam, did you just get here?" And Sam's like, yeah, I just got in. Melody goes, no, don't mess with me, Sam. Like, seriously, did you just come home? Did you just get here? And Sam's like, yes, I just got here. Like, I'm taking my shoes off. Like, I literally just got in. I'm kicking my shoes off. I'm done for the night. Where are these questions coming from? Melody says a couple hours earlier, while she was in her bedroom, she heard Sam walking through the house, walk past her bedroom door, and go into his bedroom. Sam was like, that wasn't me. No, I literally just got home. I'm not messing with you. I don't know what that was, but that wasn't me. A few weeks after that, Sam and Melody have some friends over that are visiting from out of town, and they have a little shindig. They're kind of just hanging out, enjoying each other's company. At one point during this little party, Sam and most of the friends that have come to visit go outside to, quote, smoke up. Which I'm assuming they're smoking marijuana, which doesn't invalidate the entire story by any means, but did want to include that detail. They go outside to smoke up. One of the visitors, a girl we will call Blake, she stays inside. She's like, no, I'm good. I don't need to be smoking. I'm cool. Stay inside. When the party comes back in, when the people who come in from outside come back in, they see Blake sitting on the couch in the living room. They see her and they instantly know that she is terrified. She's wrapped up in this blanket and her whole body is shaking. And they're like, Blake, are you okay? What's going on? And she said to Sam, there's somebody in your room. And I'm like, what? Blake, we were all outside. Like, who would be up in the room? Blake goes, I don't know, but there's somebody in your room, Sam. She said that she was using the restroom, and when she came out, she heard somebody in Sam's room. And she assumed it was Sam. Blake said she went over to Sam's bedroom and she opened up the door and looked in the room. She just wanted to say hi. But it wasn't Sam who was in the room. It was somebody else. I thought you were in your room, Sam, and I went in to say hi and I walked in and it wasn't you. Who was it? Blake, who's in my room? It wasn't you. They go check. Immediately after this story, Sam and his friends, they go into his room, they check, there's no one in there. They check the house, there's no one else in the house. So could Blake have accidentally seen someone else from the party in the room? She didn't know who it was. She just knew she had heard someone walk into Sam's room, and when she went in there, it wasn't Sam. Fast forward a few weeks after that, Sam and Melody's parents are visiting the house. And Melody tells them, hey, guys, I know that this is pretty sweet gig. The rent's great. Location's great. Landlord's awesome. But there's something really weird going on here. Parents are like, what are you talking about? Melody begins to tell her parents about the creepy things that she's experienced, like hearing someone walking through the house when there's nobody there. Tells them about Blake's story. The parent, I don't know if Melody knew about Sam's sleep paralysis. I don't know if he was super open about that. We've talked about that a lot in stories where people will be living in the same house experiencing weird events and not telling each other because they just figure, oh, it's nothing. But anyways, Melody gives enough information to the parents that they start getting creeped out. And since they know the landlord, they go, well, maybe, I guess this place might be haunted. We've never heard of anything like that, but we'll talk to the landlord and maybe they know something. And the parents do. They go to the landlord and they ask, hey, so our kids down there are experiencing some weird stuff? Like people walking through the house and there's nobody there. Does anyone else have a key? Maybe we shouldn't even think of spooky stuff yet. Does anyone else have a key? Could anyone be breaking into the house? But barring that, like, they're seeing people there. Their friends are seeing, like, do you know anything of what could be going on? And the landlord goes, could kind of have an idea, kind of. About a year and a half ago, a previous tenant who rented out the bottom of the house was a college student. And he killed himself. He killed himself. He committed suicide. So, if there's anything spooky going on, which I don't know, the landlord is that, I haven't experienced anything as they're wiping sweat off their brow as there's a ghost in their closet too. They're like, ah. They go, the previous tenant who lived down there killed themselves. Committed suicide. They're like, does it have anything to do with Sam's room? Because there seemed to be some activity centered around Sam's room. The landlord's like, you're going to keep asking questions about this. I thought the conversation was over. Yes. In fact, Sam's room is where that student's room was. That was his bedroom. Like, all those books and that bed and all the furniture in there, that was his. That was the suicide student guy's stuff. And, he killed himself. So, I just kept it all, and it's pre-furnished. So please don't complain about anything. Don't complain about the spirit or the haunting or the fact that your son has been living in a room full of property from a suicide victim. The parents are like, okay, well, we think we know how to solve this. They go into Sam's room, all the books belong to the suicide victim, the guy who killed himself a year and a half ago, and they don't specify where he killed himself. If I had to guess, it'd be in the bedroom. But it's possibly not. He might have, jumped off a cliff or went to a beautiful nature preserve and blew his brains out. We don't know. Probably in the room, though. The parents go down to Sam's room and they end up taking all of the books, which belong to the young man who killed himself. They take all of his books and they burn them. And they get these blessed amulets. They put one or more, I'm assuming. I don't think they go, you got the heavy lifting to do, buddy. One amulet. They put blessed amulets in Sam's and Melody's room. And Sam said after that, there were no other experiences, no other occurrences in this home. No phantom noises, no ghostly sightings, no sleep paralysis, nothing. This story was posted online underneath the name Capo FX. I think it takes place in British Columbia because that's where this person who we call Sam lives now. At least that's what he posts a lot about, Burnaby, British Columbia. Or he posts, look through the posting history. Interesting story, and it goes back to the child molesting pilot. Because when I read this story, I thought it's nice that it has a wrapped up ending. I mean, not for any sort of narrative sake, but for them. Because it's a true story and they're actually going through it. And they were able to end the haunting. But would you, just like a question of would you want to fly in a plane that's piloted by a child molester, would you want to live... here's the thing. There's a couple different ways to break this down. If someone killed themselves... Let's say you're renting a room and you don't know the person. Because it totally changes. If you have a friend or a loved one who kills himself, of course you want their stuff. That's what I believe, right? If a close friend of yours killed himself... I know it's depressing for a Friday episode, but... a close friend of yours or a loved one killed themselves. I think it's happened to all of us at some point. And someone says, hey... I'm sure they would have wanted you to have this, and it's their record collection. You're not going to be like, nope, haunted, spooky, and leave them out in the driveway. You would take the records with you. You would take it as a memory of a lost friend. But if you didn't know the person, and you have no connection to the person, would you want to live in a pre-furnished room with all of their stuff? Like, I understand, like, if I rented a room out and they said, hey, you know, the reason why I rent so cheap because some dude slit his wrists in the bathroom right there. You'd be like, yeah, whatever. Like, they're like, no, the police still have the crime scene tape up. I'm like, well, I gotta go. I'm sitting down on the toilet. Now, long after the suicide, the landlord's like, yeah, some dude slit his wrist in there. And we've had a hard time. It was in the news. It was really, like, popular. He was a really popular guy. So everyone knew him. So when he died, I don't know why it'd be in the news either. It's very rare. But anyways, the guy's like, yeah, it was a super popular guy. It's super famous guy. Super popular guy. Everyone in town loved him. But he killed himself because that's the way suicide works sometimes. It doesn't matter how happy you appear to be. I think most people would rent the room. I would. I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. But then the landlord goes, okay, now that you signed the lease, the 10-year lease, they begin wheeling in his bed and his couch and his television set and all of his music. They're like, you can only listen to this music. You're like, oh, 10,000 Maniacs. Oh, it's driving me insane. This is not false advertising. Their music actually does create maniacs. They're like bringing all of his stuff. His clothes, they're like putting it up. You're like, they're throwing your clothes out the window. Ah! You have to dress like them now. I would argue you wouldn't want that. You would not want to move into a room that's pre-furnished of belongings of a suicide victim. Or am I off base on this? I thought about that. Here's the thing. Would you rather move this? You're like, wow, Jason, I don't know where you get these questions from. Here's your choice. Would you rather move into an unfurnished bedroom where a man killed himself, and you have to bring in all your own furniture, and it's 3 stories up, it's a big apartment complex, the elevators don't work, or you can rent a room where a guy killed himself, but you have to have all of his stuff in there all the time. You have to have his food, too. It's all rotten. You're like, I guess I can eat moldy grapes. His 10,000 Maniacs is blaring through the room. You're like, It might sound like a ridiculous question, and in a lot of ways it is. But I thought about it, and I was like, Sam was sleeping, and again, they don't know where he killed himself. I think that's different as well, right? If he killed himself in that room, and all they did was flip the mattress, then 100% you do not want all of his stuff. If you don't know him, you don't want his stuff. And the reason why I say that, it's not being disrespectful towards suicide victims. You're like, it is, Jason. Maybe if you didn't laugh every 3 minutes. Listen, here's the thing. His stuff was haunted. That's what I'm getting at. It's not because it's icky. It's not because some guy killed himself and all of a sudden, like, everything's gross. His stuff was haunted. And the fact that they didn't destroy the bed, I wonder if Sam did bring in his own bed. Because he didn't give us like a layout of what he kept and what he left behind when he moved in. He may have moved in his old bed and got rid of the one that's in there. The bed may not have been in there. He may have killed himself in his bed and that was removed. But the books were definitely his. The books were left behind by the landlord. And they belonged to this young man who had killed himself 1.5 years earlier. And that caused this haunting to... You know what's interesting? We don't know about the tenant between the suicide victim and Sam and Melody. I don't know if there was 1 tenant. I don't know if there were 5 tenants. I don't even know if there was 0 tenants between that 1.5 years and Sam and Melody moving in. There may have been other people who are experiencing things. But you have Sam, you go, Jason, it's just like a ghostly sighting in a dark room. Remember, this started by Sam being attacked. This was not just sleep paralysis that was going on. This was the spirit of the suicide victim physically restraining Sam. It started off hostile. It wasn't just standing in the room. It started off by attacking Sam. So we have that. It definitely didn't seem to be. I mean, as a person, he may have been totally fine and not malevolent, not want to hurt other people. But now that he's dead and he's trapped in this place between life and death, sometimes that can bring evil out. So it's not a harmless haunting. It's not like, oh, this guy killed himself here and he's haunting these books. And every so often we see him in the rocking chair in the living room and he gives us a thumbs up when we're doing really good. Right. He's being creepy. He's attacking people. It's interesting that the two people who heard him walking and were kind of, in a way, tricking, right? Melody thought it was her brother. Blake thought it was Sam as well. There's both young women that happened to. Not Sam. Sam never heard anything like that, so you have to wonder about the reasoning or the motive behind that. Why are only young women experiencing the footsteps leading into Sam's room? There's a whole host of questions. And one of them being, would you want to rent a room out where there was property from the previous tenant there after he had killed himself? You didn't know the dude. Would you get rid of the books? Would you be like, nah? I think you definitely would if you had started to experience paranormal activity. Because they didn't really think anything at first. They didn't know anyone had killed themselves previously there. We don't know, again, if it was there or somewhere else. But then I also think, I hope this story has a happy ending for Sam and Melody, but I hope it has a happy ending for the nameless young man who took his own life. I hope so. I hope his spirit was able to move on. It is interesting, we'll wrap it up like this, I know this is going long, but it's interesting when you look at the world of the paranormal. He's attached to these books. This soul is attached to these books. And when they were burned, they no longer experienced any of this activity. But does that mean that the soul moved on? Does that mean that that soul was able to find peace after those books were burned? I hope so. Right, I hope so. Sometimes when a life is taken suddenly, like a murder or a suicide or a tragic accident, the soul doesn't really comprehend what's going on. They're kind of trapped in this place between our world and the next. And by helping them pass on, by helping them move on, you can relieve that spectral torment they're going through. It's interesting that burning the books did it. And also, I guess I can't discount the blessed amulets. And that's kind of where I'm getting at, too. But let's say that he didn't move on. Let's say that the last thing that he owned on this earth were those books. They may have been school books. They may have been books that he was obsessively studying for his schoolwork. They may have been works of fiction that he loved. They may have been fantasy novels and sci-fi novels and Star Trek books and all these wonderful tales he'd read throughout his life that he was very proud to have on his bookshelf. And they're all just scooped up and burned. The last thing that he ever owned, the last thing he took pride in, is reduced to ash in the backyard. And then to add insult to injury, they put blessed items in Sam's room and Melody's room. And the soul of this young man, it has not moved on. It has not passed on to the afterlife. It's now locked out of the last home it ever lived in. Its personal belongings reduced to ash. Protection spells, rendering him impotent. He can no longer enter the last place he called home. And the last items that he owned are now gone. Just a small pile of ash being scooped into a garbage can. Just because he no longer haunted the house, just because Sam and Melody no longer experienced him, doesn't mean that he moved on. It doesn't mean that he found peace. In fact, it could mean that he was locked out from his home, repelled by the power of the amulets, with a weakened grip on this reality after his final possessions were destroyed. It's possible that he didn't pass into the afterlife peacefully, but simply faded away, his soul slowly wasting away bit by bit, piece by piece, becoming thinner and more frail each day until he simply ceases to exist. This may end up being the story of a man who died a tragic death, not once, but twice. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, guys.